If you've been thinking about buying a Vitamix blender, today I'm going to show you my very favorite model, plus another one I bought and almost instantly regretted. This is the Vitamix 5200 model, and it's the classic shape that I think people always think of when they think of this brand. The pitcher has a narrow base, which makes it easy to blend smaller batches, like 1 cup of salad dressing or a single serve smoothie. It has pretty simple buttons on the front with no extra bells and whistles. I think this makes it super user-friendly because it's pretty clear how to make the blender go faster simply by twisting this dial. You do need to make sure you have the switch in the variable position so that your dial will work. Or you can switch this to high if you need a more powerful blend. The main pro of this blender is that it consistently gives you silky smooth results. And you don't have to use a huge quantity of ingredients in the blender to get things moving. When I tested a Blendtec blender years ago, I found it annoying that the wider base always left a few chunks behind compared to this Vitamix model. Back then, I thought it was because Vitamix was the superior brand, but I think it actually comes down to the shape of the blender pitcher. I'll show you a side-by-side comparison of how they blend in a moment. The main downside of the 5200 model is that the pitcher is so tall that it won't fit under most standard kitchen cabinets. If you want to leave your blender out on your kitchen counter, the pitcher might have to sit next to the base. Now, because the 5200 was the first model I ever bought, I assumed all Vitamix blenders would work pretty much the same. So when my first 5200 model finally died, I decided to buy their Explorian model, which was an Amazon Prime sale at the time. What I liked about the idea of this model is the pitcher is shorter, so it can fit under my kitchen cabinets fully assembled. It is a tight fit, so the tamper still has to be stored somewhere else. To make this pitcher shorter to fit under the cabinets, the base has to be wider to still hold the same quantity as the taller containers. And that's when I realized I did not like this new blender as much as my old one, because the wider base does not give you the same amazing blending results. I'll show you how it stacks up with a few side-by-side comparisons. First, I'm going to make my favorite pesto salad dressing in both blenders. This is made with olive oil, red wine vinegar, fresh basil, garlic, and a little Parmesan cheese. I'm going to start both of these at the same time on the lowest speed, so you can see how they compare. Right away, you can see that the narrow 5200 blender keeps most of the ingredients towards the bottom of the pitcher. They're not flying up the sides of the container or into the lid like the Explorian's pitcher does. In fact, I often find myself having to scrape a good portion of what I'm blending out of my lid with this Explorian blender, just to make sure everything gets incorporated. To compare, the 5200 lid barely has a drop in it. Now, the Explorian blender does tend to blend nearly as well as the 5200, once you've stopped and scraped down the sides and that lid. The main hang-up I have with it is that there's almost always a chunk that gets missed, even when it looks smooth in the blender. For example, here's an entire garlic clove that my Explorian blender missed, even with stopping, scraping, and blending it several times. The same thing has happened to me with smoothies. Almost every time I make a smoothie on camera with this blender, I find a chunk when I'm pouring it into the glass. I also find it annoying that when I take off the lid, it usually drips onto the Vitamix base, so I have extra cleanup when I'm done. This almost never happens when I use my narrow 5200 blender, but I will say the more narrow pitcher does require use of the tamper more often to keep things moving along, especially when I'm making something thick, like a smoothie or my pumpkin pie filling. I also tested both of these blenders side by side with my dairy-free nacho cheese sauce, because getting a silky smooth sauce was one of the first things I really loved about owning a Vitamix. Let's see how these two blenders handle it. I feel like a broken record at this point, but as you can see, the 5200 blender just does a better job of keeping the ingredients where the blades are, so everything gets pulverized smoothly. The Explorian is doing a fine job, and if this was the first Vitamix I ever owned, I'd probably be pretty happy with it. But I do get tired of having to scrape the ingredients out of the lid. Look at how much of my recipe is stuck up here instead of down towards the blades getting blended. In comparison, the 5200 model has a pretty clean lid while blending this cheese sauce. This is the texture I got from the Explorian blender. It's pretty smooth, but I still see a few small cashew pieces. The 5200 got things a little smoother, but like I said, if the Explorian were the first Vitamix I ever owned, I think I would be pretty happy with this. I've been living with the Explorian blender for over a year now, and since it's still not my favorite, I decided to see if buying an extra accessory might make me like it more. Vitamix sells this smaller blender cup attachment, so this is a workaround if you find yourself disappointed that your Vitamix doesn't have a more narrow base. Because this option is more narrow than the 5200 blender, it blends small batches even better. I poured my dressing with that garlic chunk into this cup, and look how wonderfully smooth and emulsified it makes the dressing. This is really great if you blend a lot of salad dressings or smaller single-serve smoothies. This set that I bought comes with 2 containers along with lids, so these can double as your storage jar or help you take a smoothie on the go. This accessory works with both of my Vitamix bases, so it's a great option if you already own one of these. I use my Vitamix multiple times a day to make things like my morning tea latte, smoothies, and salad dressings. So I'm sharing this video in case you're doing your research ahead of time and want to choose the best Vitamix model. In my opinion, that's the 5200, but I'd love to hear if you have a different opinion. With that being said, I'll be using the Explorian model to test my recipes moving forward, because I think it's safe to assume that not everyone will have the best blender. So hopefully that will make my recipes a little more foolproof for more people. I hope you find this quick review helpful, and just so you know, it's not sponsored because I bought all of these blenders myself. Let me know if you'd like to see any other reviews in the future.